Good evening, everyone. Here we go, it's quiet. Good evening. I want to hear your voices tonight, and that's why we're here. My name is Katie Brennan. I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, and I will be brief. I wanted to welcome you, or rather thank you for welcoming us to your town. We are here to hear from you tonight as we present our action plan for Ida. And what does that even mean? It was a year and 1 week ago that Ida hit, and then it's a long journey. Congress passes money, HUD and FEMA work together. It takes a long time. Then they give us guidance. Then they ask us to say, okay, what is it that folks need? And then we go out and we talk to all of you and we say, okay, what happened and what do you need and how do we work to make sure that we're more resilient in the future? And thank you for your patience. I wish you didn't have to be patient, but this is all part of the process and we're moving as quickly as we can. And so without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to the team, but I'm gonna leave it on a note of the real purpose of this is truly to hear from you, and whether these programs, you like them, you don't like them, you think they're gonna work for you, and if we offer them to New Rochelle, how are we going to make it work with you? Because this is a partnership. How are you and your neighbors going to be able to access these resources? So thank you, and Zach Tierney, take it away.
Thank you, Katie. So again, my name is Zach Tierney. I'm the Director of External Affairs here at the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery. Katie touched on welcome, so just again, thank you all for welcoming us. I'm just going to go through some of the logistics about this public comment period and ways to make comments, and then we'll get to a presentation on what this money is, what it can do, what it can't do, and how we're contemplating the program design that we're looking to roll out. So just bear with me as I go through the required logistics here for our hearing. For those that need interpretation services, we have translation interpretation headsets in the back. If you want to ask a question or make a comment in another language, you may do so during the comment section or submit it in writing using a comment card. And my colleague Gabrielle here will be able to respond in Spanish. We did not receive any requests for other interpretation or into other languages for this hearing besides Spanish. And for the next public hearing on Tuesday, September 13th, requests for interpretation services or other special needs must be made 72 hours in advance. To make that request via telephone, you can contact us at 855-697-7263 or send an email to info@stormrecovery.ny.gov. We have action plan summaries translated into 11 additional languages on our website at stormrecovery.ny.gov. This hearing is a chance for interested members of the public to comment on the state's proposed Hurricane Ida action plan. I appreciate you taking the time to comment, and we are here to listen. Anyone who wishes to provide testimony this evening must join the speakers list by signing up at the entrance or submit a written comment for this evening's hearing using one of the comment cards available at the sign-in table. I will provide another opportunity to join the speakers list at the end of this evening's presentation. Once you have been added to the speakers list, when your name is called, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to comment. A sign will indicate when you have 30 seconds remaining to wrap up your comments. At the end of the 3 minutes, time will be called and we will move to the next speaker. If you would like to provide written comments on the action plan in addition to or in lieu of oral comments, you must submit them electronically to our website by clicking on the link on the header, submitting a public comment on the action plan at stormrecovery.ny.gov/funding/action plans amendments. Comments may also be submitted via email to info@stormrecovery.com. In addition, you may mail comments to Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, attention public comments, 60 Broad Street, 26th floor, New York, New York, 10004. All comments will be accepted until Wednesday, September 28th, 2022 at noon. Comments received after noon on Wednesday, September 28th, 2022 will not be considered. All of this information is available on our website. We will do our best to provide responses to your questions and comments during this public hearing, but some comments may need to be addressed in writing. The comments received this evening will be reviewed by the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, and responses to public comments will be included in the New York State's Hurricane Ida Action Plan when it is officially submitted to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and will be made public. If you are seeking information or resources related to other programs, those are available at stormrecovery.ny.gov. The state of New York is currently accepting public comment on the proposed Hurricane Ida Action Plan of Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. These funds will be used to support long-term recovery efforts following Hurricane Ida throughout the state of New York. HUD requires grantees to create an action plan which documents the proposed use of funds. On May 24th, 2022, HUD published a Federal Register notice outlining the allocation of $41,262,000 in funding to support New York's recovery efforts following Hurricane Ida. The Appropriations Act, Public Law 117-43, requires that prior to the obligation of CDBG-DR funds, a grantee must submit a plan detailing the proposed use of funds, including criteria for eligibility and how these funds will address disaster relief, long-term recovery, restoration of infrastructure and housing, and mitigation needs in the most impacted and distressed areas. The state published its action plan for a 30-day public comment period on July 29th, 2022. That would be August 29th, 2022, excuse me. Okay, with all that, thank you all for bearing with me. I'm gonna walk us through the proposed design and again, some of the important information to know. So here is our timeline. This is, again, federal funding that comes from Congress after disasters that is meant to supplement funds generally received through other sources of disaster recovery funding. So you have FEMA, SBA, your private insurance, other sources, and then Congress passes an appropriation to fill in that, what we would call the unmet need. Congress passed that appropriation in September of 2021. The Federal Register notice, which is sort of our rules of the road of how we can design these programs, what we can use them for, was published in late May of this year. And so that was our starting point to have the conversations, knowing what we could and couldn't do. And again, we published that action plan on August 29th, and we are in that public comment period. Next steps from this point, we'll submit the action plan with all of your comments and our responses to those comments to HUD. They have up to 60 days to approve, so we expect by the end of November to have HUD approval on the action plan itself. And we'll begin outreach for programs for individuals later in the fall and winter of this year, and hopefully a little earlier, but setting the expectation now, we are looking to get applicants through the process into the spring of next year. And so we went over this a little bit, but what is the action plan? The action plan is a summary of the information for potential applicants, both local governments and individuals, but also our analysis that helped inform our decision-making and where we are targeting these funds, looking at disaster impacts, unmet needs from the disaster, mitigation needs, and again, our proposed programs. So what are some important federal requirements? Well, there are many pages and pages and pages of Federal Register notices that lay out our rules of the road. I think the most important ones to keep in mind are where we can, one of the most important is where we can spend these funds. So HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, again, who these funds flow through, are from, identified the most impacted and distressed areas. They identify that as Westchester County based on their data. We are required to spend 80% of this grant in the most impacted and distressed area that HUD has identified, again, that being Westchester County. The state's permitted to spend up to 20% of the grant in areas that we have identified as the most impacted and distressed, and we've identified those as the counties that received individual assistance from FEMA. That's Dutchess, Orange, Rockland, Nassau, and Suffolk. Another important federal requirement to keep in mind, this is HUD funding. It is required to be targeted at the majority to benefit low to moderate income individuals. And so 70% or more of this grant must benefit low to moderate income individuals. So that can either be an individual and their individual income if you're a homeowner or a tenant, or that can be an area benefit. So if we're talking about infrastructure projects, if we have identified the area that is benefiting from the infrastructure project, 50% or more of the folks in that area are low to moderate income, that can be an eligible infrastructure project. And you can see here that low to moderate income is defined as 80% of the area median income or lower. So you see that sliding scale there. That's what we're working off of for and how we define low to moderate income families in Westchester County. This, you can probably see a little bit better in the action plan itself, but this is the activities and the general program categories that HUD has provided to grantees like the state to identify where the budgets of their funding are and what the estimated outcomes are. Again, I want to emphasize these are estimated outcomes and from our initial analysis, and will be, determined and subject to once we roll out an application period and have identified a population of folks that are interested and eligible for the program, and we'll be making adjustments to this once we have a defined population. Okay, so the programs themselves. The largest bulk, about 40% of our grant, is to be spent on the Renters Resilient Housing Incentive. So what we heard a lot was about, and what we've seen not just in Ida, but in disasters across the country, is that tenants generally we found to be underserved by the normal streams of disaster recovery funding. And what we're looking to do is to encourage renters, especially in substandard or storm damage units, thinking about basement units, but not necessarily necessary to be basement units, to provide assistance to them to help them relocate and find above standard housing. We are looking at owners, also looking at owners of 1 to 4 family rental properties on a case-by-case basis, of making improvements, repairs, mitigation measures to those units if it makes more sense to do that. But again, that'll be on a case-by-case basis, and the majority will be relocation awards up to 18 months for folks that have previously needed to relocate and are experiencing financial hardship from that, or 12 months of rental assistance for households who will relocate in the future. And again, we have a hardship process that allows for rental assistance up to $100,000 or the equivalent of 42 months of rental assistance. Our second program is a housing recovery and reimbursement program. So this is modeled off of very similar to our Sandy single-family homeowner program, which provides both prospective repairs and reimbursements for costs incurred not covered by other disaster recovery sources. So if there is still damage, unmet need, things that need to be fixed, remediation that needs to be done, we will have our contractors come and do that work for you in your home. Or if you did work and it wasn't covered by other sources, we can cut you a check. Again, for both this tenant relocation program and the homeowner recovery and reimbursement program, these are prioritized for low to moderate income individuals. We will, on a case-by-case basis, review for folks that are not low to moderate income and develop criteria for a hardship, so that there will be a few folks in this program that are not low to moderate income, but will be determined on a case-by-case basis, and we'll be prioritizing low to moderate income applicants. The maximum award that we're providing here, capped at $50,000 and capped at $30,000 for reimbursement work. This program also includes, this program also includes resiliency work. So if you have mechanicals, electrical, plumbing in your basement that needs to be elevated up out of the basement or higher up so that it's less prone to flooding and damage, again, that's work that our contractors can do for you in your home. Our third program is our Affordable Housing Resiliency Initiative. This is a program that we will be working with all kinds of affordable housing, not just necessarily public housing authorities, but looking at really any type of managed multifamily affordable housing that is interested in making resiliency upgrades to protect their tenants and their residents. we will work with them to both help inform the design and provide funding for the construction. That is a cap of up to $3 million per project, but depending on the applications and the requests for proposals that we receive, may be open to make exceptions to that. And our last program here, the Resilient Investments Through Support and Capital, is funding that is going generally to local governments, but is available to nonprofits and other organizations to do mitigation work, both to infrastructure, buildings, and also includes funds for planning. So we are providing funding to local governments to help them become stronger applicants for larger infrastructure grants. There's a lot of infrastructure money out there right now. We're looking to make sure that our local governments and communities are well positioned to be strong applicants for all the money that's out there. We have a history of providing a lot of technical assistance to local governments and folks that we work with to make sure that they are well set to leverage as much funding out there as possible. So again, all the details of that are in our action plan. I tried to breeze through that as quickly as possible and mostly hear your questions, try to answer them as best that we can. Again, this public comment period is open until September 28th. And with that, I think, Mayor, if you'd like to come up and say something, or again, thank you for hosting us.
If your own team doesn't applaud you, you're really in trouble, right? So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Noam Bramson. I'm the mayor of New Rochelle. It's a pleasure to say hello to neighbors from within the community and to welcome those from beyond our community, and especially to say hello to the state team. We're very pleased to have you here, and we regard your presence here as recognition that New Rochelle is among the communities in our region that was very hard hit by Ida. And we're very pleased that you are focusing on how we can best use these resources to achieve a recovery for not just New Rochelle, but for our partner communities throughout Westchester County. I, of course, am looking forward to hearing the input just as you are, and I realize there may be changes in the program as we proceed, but I do want to say that my initial response to what you've presented is quite positive. It is certainly consistent with the informal conversations that you had with New Rochelle's leadership in the weeks leading up to now, and I'm sure consistent with the input that you receive from other municipalities as well. I do appreciate your recognition that although FEMA was quite helpful in the immediate aftermath of Ida, there still is a significant gap between the damages, the financial costs that were incurred by many property owners, by many renters, and the amount that was available from FEMA, and so these could be critical bridge funds. I also appreciate the fact that you are looking not only retrospectively at dealing with damage that has already been experienced, but also prospectively at how we can address the reality of what we recognize is coming, and that is the changing climate that will result in more severe storms with greater frequency, and the necessity of making sure that both private property and public infrastructure is prepared to confront that reality. So thank you again for the thoughtful nature of what you've presented to us. And I will say that New Rochelle, and I'm sure this is true of other municipalities, we will do whatever we can to partner with you in order to share information with our community, make sure that our residents are equipped to apply for whatever funding for which they are eligible, as well as doing our part in terms of applications for public money that we can help with planning to make sure that public infrastructure is ready for the future. So thank you again for being here. Looking forward to additional comments from others who are present.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'd like to welcome up Senator Shelley Mayer, if you'd like to say just a couple things.
Well, one, thank you to the team from GoServe for having this public hearing right here in New Rochelle. And thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm State Senator Shelley Mayer. I represent the 37th Senate District. And I also appreciated the opportunity to share the experience that my office, like my other colleagues in elected office, had helping our constituents deal with and recover from COVID, which they have not recovered from. And I can't start to discuss this without talking about the impact of Hurricane Ida in my district, which goes from Yonkers to Bedford. It was absolutely devastating and deadly, and we all know that. 5 people died in Westchester. Thousands were rendered homeless. Millions of dollars were lost and never compensated by insurance or FEMA. Thousands of cars were totaled. Basements and lower floors were completely destroyed, along with everything in them. Our first responders were truly heroes that day, but placed in great personal risk. I represent a diverse community from poor to wealthy and in between, but no one was exempt. From the flooded basements of Armavilla and Yonkers, where disabled adults were stranded without electricity for days, to the co-ops and condos and houses and rental homes of New Rochelle, where basements were flooded and destroyed, and I saw basements of co-ops and condos where no power could be turned on, to the streets and homes of Tuckahoe, to entire blocks of Harrison, of course, to the heart of Mamaroneck and Portchester, heavily immigrant communities where people's homes, businesses, churches, and not-for-profits were destroyed, to the city of Rye, and to Brook Lane in Rybrook, where an entire road was underwater and almost every house that's on that street. We were in the middle of a disaster, and we have not recovered. Afterwards, in January of last year, I introduced a bill with my colleague, Assemblyman Steve Otis, focused on compensating for losses, creating a fund to compensate for losses. It did not make it in the budget, and we compromised. We took the best we could, which was this federal money that was focused on resiliency and forward-looking as opposed to recovery and reimbursement. And I'm pleased at the step forward, but I would be dishonest if I said it was enough. It isn't enough. It isn't enough money. 41 million is too little for the scope of the damage of this hurricane. The recovery is limited under the rules you proposed and some by the federal government, that personal property cannot be recovered. Cars, including cars throughout our districts, no recovery. No recovery for small businesses. The businesses in Mamaroneck, the nail salons and restaurants, the daycare centers. No recovery for our small restaurants. No recovery for churches and not-for-profits that were destroyed in this, absolutely destroyed, and have to use their own and raise their own funds to recover. And unfortunately, as currently drafted, no recovery for co-ops and condominiums, even though in our community, as we know, they are a place that is an affordable source of housing for many of our residents. So I'm pleased that we've started down this path, but I urge that you broaden the rules to the greatest extent possible under the federal guidelines. And in doing so, we look for other sources because we cannot forget the need to compensate people who did not have money and had to recover and pay money, if they could, to get through Ida. So I say modify the rules to the greatest extent possible, broaden eligibility to the greatest extent possible, streamline the process, please make it better than FEMA, please make it better than the other programs we've had to go through, make it easy for our constituents to get whatever funds are available. And I know that we will work with you as a willing partner to make sure these funds get out and that we fight for the additional funds that I know our communities desperately need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. And I'd like to just call up Assemblyman Steve Otis. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you, Katie, and thank everybody for being here. And I'd say to Goser, welcome to New Rochelle and the Sound Shore of Westchester County. Thank you for the Hurricane Ida Action Plan proposal, and thank you for coming here to share your plan, to solicit further comments. And Shelley and I worked very closely on a lot of these issues, experienced a lot of the same problems in different communities, and have some comments on the plan. Clearly, Westchester County was the hardest hit area from Hurricane Ida. Worst flood loss challenges in the region, and but we do not stand in isolation from last year. Prior storms have also reminded Sound Shore residents of our continued vulnerability to storm events and the importance of implementing resilience and mitigation projects on an expedited basis. I've worked on these issues for many years. I was the mayor of the city of Rye when we were in FEMA's Project Impact, Westchester County Flood Action Task Force, and worked with GOSER after Sandy, as did Shelley Mayer and I. And I give an aside, before GOSER was created, Shelley and I met with the governor's office in early 2013 about the need to set up this agency and to provide these kinds of resources out of Sandy. The recurring challenge for residents and local governments has been to keep the focus on implementing resiliency projects when the sky is blue and when memories of storm damage fade with time. We need to double our efforts at implementing resiliency projects, and that has been the message we've heard consistently from Governor Hochul, from the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery, and from the many other state agencies that have been very active in Westchester since Hurricane Ida last September. Shelley and I have worked very closely with DEC, among other agencies, to try and do things on the Sound Shore. The Hurricane Ida Action Plan is an important part of the state government response because of its focusing on assessing and responding the unmet needs, especially related to housing. GOSER reviewed what other federal and state programs were able to accomplish to date, and that review was a very important part of GOSER's plan to use this over $41 million in federal funds, to use funding where we've had gaps. And I think that is a great way to approach this because a lot of costs were not reimbursed. In developing the plan, GOSER met with local officials, with vital not-for-profit community groups, state legislators, and numerous state agencies involved in the Ida response. The programs in the plan are designed to address those unmet needs related to housing, consistent with the federal framework covering these community development block grant funds. One of the problems, and I think GOSER will say this in your questions after, but the federal rules are difficult. The HUD rules are difficult. And so to navigate a state program and qualify to be able to use the money, they've tried to do that. What is great here is we're dealing for the first time with tenants, which is huge, and for other folks in tough housing situations. I'd like to talk about a few of the components that I think are important in terms of these efforts. Very pleased to see that the plan includes funding of tasks that may not be readily available in other programs, such as repairs to owner-occupied residents, relocation of tenants, and support for housing authorities and not-for-profits that provide housing. That isn't so easy in some of the other programs. The plan also underscores the importance of reducing natural disaster risk, the importance of reducing exposure, and where appropriate, removing people from harm's way. The plan also reinforces the importance of building code compliance and sustainable rebuilding. The current theme of Build Back Better has a longer history when it comes to rebuilding after a storm. Hurricane Ida Action Plan projects will include building code compliance and improvements to make housing more resilient. This legislative session, Senator Mayer and I passed legislation in both houses to require flood mitigation considerations be reviewed for elevated consideration in the state building code. The New York State Building Code Council would then examine how to better incorporate these issues as part of state standards. It's great to see that the building code compliance issues are included as a principle in the GOSER plan. As was the case with GOSER's New York Rising program, the Hurricane Action Plan encourages matching the funds provided through this program with other funding sources. And as Shelley mentioned, we need a lot more money. This is especially important in the case of municipal projects, where more funding is needed from all sources to implement flood mitigation and resiliency projects, many of which have already been studied but not yet funded or implemented. One area where I think the plan can be modified would be to include cooperatives and condominiums in the Affordable Housing Resiliency Initiative eligibility criteria. If the resident economic qualifications criteria are met, those complexes should not be excluded just because they're constituted as a cooperative or a condominium. And certainly that's a case, a lot of our senior housing locations are this way. They're going to qualify in terms of the need. So let's change those rules. Another area where we need to find additional resources is to help fund mitigation projects affecting small businesses in high-risk flood areas. Fitting these projects within the HUD funding parameters may not be feasible. I suggest that GOSER look for outside funding or partnerships with other state agencies, such as New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, Empire State Development, and the New York State Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, to try and find additional funding to help these small business locations. In every community I represent, we have businesses that continue to be vulnerable to major storm events. We need to give local governments additional tools to fund flood mitigation projects necessary to better protect these businesses. GOSER can play a role in supporting these efforts. Hurricane Ida also highlighted the weaknesses of our municipal stormwater systems across the state. Failing or inadequately sized stormwater systems resulted in damage to residential and commercial properties. I want to make a pitch today for voter approval of the Environmental Bond Act, which is on the ballot this November. The Bond Act includes a proposal I have championed to create a new stormwater grant program. The Bond Act, if approved by the voters, will provide at least $250 million for these needed grants. Our municipalities and local property taxpayers need state assistance to help pay for these needed stormwater upgrades. I look forward to hearing the other comments on the Hurricane Ida Action Plan, and no GOSAR will make adjustments. I want to again thank Governor Hochul, my colleagues in both houses of the legislature, local officials. Thank Katie Brennan, who's here, who's the executive director of GOSER, and Zach Tierney, who I've worked with over past years, and the entire GOSER team for securing these federal funds and for making a commitment to addressing the housing and infrastructure needs that continue to require our attention and commitment. So we have a good start here. Thank you for coming to New Rochelle, which is exciting for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much for your comments. We're going to move to the signed up speakers list. Forgive me if I can't read handwriting as well as I should, but Vivian Jones? Thank you. You also can stay in your seat. We can hear you if that's easier. Yeah, you have 3 minutes. Yeah.
Well, I am here. I had property damage on my house. I wrote to FEMA. I joined the FEMA program. They supplied some money, but I have a foundation issue, so I need an engineer to come and help me. And it's been a year, and the crack just keeps cracking more. It's the back wall against the side wall, and it's separated approximately 3 inches. And the house is gonna fall down. I can't get any help. I have no money. I'm on fixed income.
You sound like a great candidate for the program that we are rolling out. So we have your information here.
For help.
Yeah, so, and engineers we have engineers. Money, we have money. Fixed income, you're our people. So, again, we're gonna be rolling out applications in a couple months. But we have your information, we'll keep you updated as we start to move towards that process. And again, we can't promise eligibility. We have to go through a whole process of review, but
Takes so long, and the crack
yeah.
is still cracking. Can't do anything.
We hear you. We hear you. So yeah, we'll keep you in the loop on the program as we get ready to roll it out. Great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for coming. Wilson Kimball from the
Hi, good evening. I'm Wilson Kimball from Municipal Housing for the City of Yonkers. Good evening, Senators, Mayor Ramson, Katie, Zach, and Lori. On behalf of the Municipal Housing Authority for the City of Yonkers, I want to thank you and your staff for putting together the New York State Hurricane Ida Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Action Plan. Macy supports the plan completely. We are particularly grateful that the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery took the time to hear our issues and react to them directly. When Hurricane Ida made landfall in New York on September 1st, 2021, as a Category 4 hurricane, Macy, which is the largest owner and manager of affordable housing in the city of Yonkers, was directly impacted. We had just completed the renovation of one of our oldest properties, Lower Court, which involved new boilers, new washers and dryers, new HVAC units, and a new community room. Everything was lost due to flooding from overwhelmed combined water and sewer systems. Our losses totaled approximately $1 million. However, when we went to FEMA and HUD, we were told that we could not get grants for them because the property had been privatized so that we could use LIHTC, low-income housing tax credits, and borrow private funds to fund the renovation of the property. Whether or not the buildings are owned by Macy or by an LLC for the purposes of funding renovations, the tenants remain the same, as does the mission of the authority. The Affordable Housing Resiliency Initiative and the Resilient Investments through Support and Capital Program that you and your office have included in the plan will help our affordable housing tenants. Extreme weather conditions like torrential rains will continue to overwhelm the combined sewer and water lines in Yonkers and in other communities. Long-term solutions to make our properties more resilient are needed. We simply do not have the funding required to address climate resiliency issues on our properties and to the surrounding communities' infrastructure improvements. Your proposed plan provides a way to move forward and address the needs of low-income communities who are the most impacted and least able to recover from storm impacts. I cannot emphasize enough how much this means not only to us as property managers, but also to our tenants who can shelter in place without the threat of raw sewage and contaminated waters in their homes and common spaces. Macy is the fourth largest housing authority in New York State. We own and operate over 3,500 units. We administer over 5,000 vouchers. We house thousands of families and seniors. On behalf of our tenants, we thank you for your vision, your plan, and your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We also have Carlos from the Housing Authority. Do you wish to make comments also, or?
Good evening. My name is Carlos Lavoy Diaz. I'm the Chief Operating Officer from the Housing Authority, but also a resident of Yonkers. And we're really excited about this plan because include not only affordable housing, but when you see the plan, you also include small landlords, which are the heart of some of these affordable housing units, including landlords that just rent 1 or 2 units, and that is about 40% of our landlords. Also, the key word here is resilient. We need to really look into the future and look at these projects from a different perspective. Like Wilson just mentioned, we have a property that never had any flood in the history of Yonkers, and during this hurricane, it was affected. The last comment I want to make is about diversity. Some of our small landlords and some of our communities have language issues, doesn't trust the government, doesn't know how to fill out these applications. And I'm glad that you are addressing that, and we encourage the plan not only to be translated, but to be explained to seniors, to not only Latinos, but also you have a large Asian community and so forth. We're excited. We want to be part of it and to recognize that the outreach to these communities has to be diverse and understanding that, as you can see here, some people don't even know how to fill out the applications. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Sweeney.
I'm a consultant, I work with housing authorities throughout the Hudson Valley area. And when Ida hit, a lot of communities look to the housing authorities as their safe haven. Whether they're all in low-income communities. And these, when their homes were hit, they looked to the housing authority for like areas of refuge. And I think in part of what you're looking at here, I think you have to support, whether it's, as Wilson said, it's a tax credit property that's subsidized by tax credits and state funding. The state's been very good to our community in Hudson Valley for funding for that. But there also needs to be resources there in Greenberg and in Yonkers and even in White Plains. A lot of seniors, a lot of elderly people are on dialysis, they're on oxygen machines, and when we lose power, those people have nothing. We're scrambling, and they come to the housing authority as the municipal government looking for help. So I think as you're looking at funding sources and ways to invest, I would encourage you to look at to add funding sources or target it towards community centers that are within these public housing properties or tax credit properties to make sure that they have the energy, the generators, and the resiliency there so that they can have safe passage to get those systems in place. A lot of the infrastructure in these communities, especially in these low-income areas, have been historically disinvested in, and part of the issue is that disinvestment means they have to cross flooded streets. They have to cross these ways to get to that area of refuge. So you have to also look at those means and investments, make prudent investments. And, there's not a lot of money here. This is really not a heck of a lot of money. I think Senator Mayer said, this is nothing, right? The need here is 50, 100 times bigger than this. So as you make investments, I would encourage you to make prudent kind of community-based investments that link all these things together versus just trying to put dollars everywhere. So, but I think it's a great plan. I think it's a good start, and we're certainly supportive of it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to make a comment or have questions? Yeah.
I just want to say, I'm representing, I'm helping my mother, who is a senior citizen in the town of Greenberg, and her home resident, like the other lady there, her home was hit hard. The garage, the basement, and the foundation is affected, damaged, needs repair. And she did get help from FEMA, but just to do the new HVAC systems, the machines, that was basically it. So her home, and she wants to stay in her home, she's independent. She lives there alone, I live nearby, I help her out as much as I can. And she really, her home could really benefit with some of these funds, I know the town of Greenberg is trying to, there's a brook near there called Troublesome Brook. And Greenberg, Paul Feiner, they're trying to fix some things, but they really need, like the other gentleman there said, I forgot your name, the infrastructure there, the pipes are from when it used to be farmland. The pipes are maybe like a foot in diameter. They need to be enlarged maybe to 3 feet, 4 feet to handle all that volume of water. And that's the issue. That backs up and it goes into so many homes, not just my mother's home, but many other homes. Greenville Fire Department gets flooded. Curry Chevrolet gets flooded. Anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time, but thank you very much. She could really benefit from it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Residential home.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yes, good evening. My name is Robert Douglas. I reside at 185 Brookdale in New Rochelle, between 5th Avenue and Brookside. I'm an 8-year, maybe 9-year homeowner there. We were completed flood. The whole block was flooded out. I'm talking about you could float a boat down the street because we lost 3 cars plus the garage and the complete basement.
Right.
I guess, I heard Senator Shelley say about not being enough money. I really appreciate you acknowledging that. This is a drop in the bucket. More importantly, I'm more concerned about the infrastructure. This is the second flood, as you all made mention of. Sandy, the block was decimated also. I wasn't a resident at that time there. I bought my home not knowing that those homes were underwater in Sandy. So this is the second time in less than 10 years. We talked about the global warming a little bit and environmental things. It's going to happen again. It's not if, it's when.
Right.
So my thing is, yeah, I want more allocations to infrastructure so that we can be resilient and prevent these things from happening. Because the aid for reparation, that's not enough. We're just gonna keep repairing, putting Band-Aids on the solution. So I'd like to see more money in the infrastructure. I do appreciate, again, hearing people's testimony about FEMA not covering a lot. We're not in a designated flood zone. That means when you purchase your home, that's not a requirement or a suggestion for you because it's not a flood zone. Yet, we have lost everything twice. People in my neighborhood have been there 15, 20, 30 years. So at this point now, I'm a owner of flood insurance. Again, we can't replace memories and things that were lost in the pictures and the hard drives that we lost, right? And then also the insurance, as he mentioned, the sewer backup, that's all they gave me, right? I didn't know anything about riders. So the rider is for insurance, sewage backup. So they gave us that completely. That was $10,000. That was nothing. Again, my water was to the ceiling, to the rafters of the floor above it. So that means everything, furniture, everything's floating, everything's in the bed. Gone. Not enough. FEMA did come in, albeit months later, waiting, putting in the applications, calling, what's going on. The adjuster comes out, the whole thing happened. So 10 plus 20 is 30. Some people that was good for. Most people on my block have not repaired their basements. It's back to the studs. They refuse to finish their basements because why? It's going to happen again. Why should I finish my basement at this point? So again, just to remediate the situation by helping with the infrastructure, that would be the best use of the dollars for me, to build up these areas so it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Just like a few folks have said that 41 million, not enough to upgrade all the infrastructure in Westchester, but we do intend to use this funding to help leverage some of the other funding that's out there to help communities upgrade their infrastructure in exactly the way that you're talking about. So thank you for your comments. Any other comments, questions? Okay. All right, well, thank you all so much for coming. It was great to meet all of you, and we'll stick around for a little bit if you have any other questions. Thank you.